Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The rising Australian heavyweight prospect Justis Huni, currently unbeaten at 7-0, has signed a multi-year promotional contract with Matchroom Boxing. So this is a big move for the young 23-year-old Australian who had been weighing his options. Just a week ago, Mick Francis of Tasman Fighters, who Huni has been with since the beginning, confirmed they were weighing options. His contract with DNL Events, which is Dean Lonergan's promotional company, was up. They were considering all the big boys, as Francis said. So now Huni signs with Matchroom. Could open all sorts of doors because Huni has become an increasingly big fish in a small pond in Australia, and let's face it, he's been fighting different fights in Australia, a bit out of sight, out of mind for the rest of the sort of boxing world for the most part. I've seen some videos recently where different channels have done videos about prospects that are up and coming. Huni hasn't even made the list, and he is definitely one of the top heavyweight prospects coming through. I have Jared Anderson, Bakadir Jalalov, and then Justis Huni is in that next couple. So he is a talent. He's been a decent and decorated amateur, and he's had it pretty tough so far in his pro career. Really started out strong, good opposition, but the press release. So obviously you can see the little poster here confirming welcome to the team, etc. Then we get through some different comments where it basically goes to, you know, bronze at the 2019 World Championships and different fights and blah, blah, blah. Bearing in mind, he missed the Olympics after injuring his hands against Paul Gallen. But the comments from Huni himself, and this is also parroted on his social media platforms, I'm extremely proud to announce I've signed with the world's premier promoter. Many thanks to Mick and Fran at Tasman Fighters. Let's get it. Then we have Eddie Hearn saying, I'm delighted to welcome Justis Huni to the Matchroom Boxing team. Justis has already become one of the biggest names in Australian boxing and is ranked in the top 15 now. We look forward to boxing him around the world and leading him to a shot at the world heavyweight title. The signing also continues to strengthen our Australian roster with more additions expected in the coming months. We look forward to our return to this important market in the first half of 2023. Eddie Hearn, his Justis Huni's new promoter, who in a comment which was posted to Matchroom socials had stated that Justis Huni, he thinks it's realistic to get him a world title shot, maybe not in 2024 but 2025, but he says they will be working towards that goal. And I think with Justis Huni having his deal having been up, he needed to go overseas, either UK, United States, and ply his trade, build his reputation, and start moving towards eliminators and different rankings and sanctioning bodies. Already has one after his most recent fight, but obviously with Matchroom, they're going to try build him to something significant. So 7-0 at the moment, but as I say, he's been matched tough. Just recently had a really tough fight against Kiki Toa-Latelli. Before that, it was Joe Goodall. Very entertaining fights. And if you haven't seen much about Huni or don't know too much about him, I have covered all his fights from his first fight, where he did fight for the Australian heavyweight title in his first fight. So go search the channel up if you want to, a bit of a list of different videos where Huni has been covered, his fights, etc., and other news, and also covering Justis Huni in various videos on Patreon, where I was talking about some of this stuff just a week or so ago. Huni is one of these guys, very talented, but he's not a big puncher. He fights like a puncher, but he couldn't knock the skin off a rice pudding. But he's been in very entertaining fights, but it'll be interesting. What do they do with him next? Obviously, they've talked about maybe him being on Canelo Alvarez's next card or a big card. I would imagine it'll be a showcase fight. It won't be against someone that is too dangerous. It'll be below where he's been fighting, and maybe the next couple of fights will be a cut below as they look to sort of get him in matchups where he can look good, dominate, and maybe get the stoppages rolling again. So you've got a case as well with Matchroom looking to expand its operations in Australia. It makes sense Huni being in their stable because there's a logical matchup that they can build towards. Dempsey McKean. Dempsey McKean, also unbeaten. He signed on to Matchroom, about a year or so ago. He's had some pretty low-level matchups. His name was briefly mentioned for an Anthony Joshua fight as being a front-runner. Seems to have died down, that sort of talk. But Huni and McKean at some point, it makes logical sense, and that would be a decent main event and build the winner into a much stronger position in the heavyweight division once it eventually is staged, if in fact it can be held. I mean, I would pick Justis Huni right now to beat Dempsey McKean, who has been in some pretty disappointing fights so far with Matchroom, looked a little bit lackluster, and I'm not sure that the matchmaking has really done too much for him. One of his best wins is against Kiki Tolatelli, which I think was about his 20th fight. Justis Huni just fought him in his 7th. So they've been really ambitious with Justis Huni in his matchmaking thus far in his career. He's faced Whainga Orpilu, Christian Soy, Jack Maris, Paul Gallen, Joe Goodall, Kiki Tolatelli. There's someone else I'm forgetting, but in the scheme of things, most of those guys you wouldn't be fighting maybe until your 10th, 12th, 14th type of fight, like a Kiki Tolatelli. So he's been pretty tough so far, but I expect the next one maybe be a bit of a soft lob overall, but it's a good move for him because he'd outgrown his current situation. And there was some talk potentially through the Dean Lonergan link-up with Bob Arum and Top Rank. Maybe that would be an avenue for him. But when you look at Matchroom stable overall, you've got kind of a bit of a gap there where he can kind of go in and go, look, I'm a heavyweight for the future. I'm probably the best prospect on your roster right now with the biggest chance to actually go to world level. And that's no disrespect to some of the other heavyweights that are there, but Johnny Fisher's a raw project. Solomon Dakers is looking pretty good. But I think, apart from those guys, it's a little bit light in terms of what's coming through when you consider there's a gap of those sort of middling to upper tier heavyweights that have sort of left Matchroom in recent years. You can think Huey Fury, Martin Bacoli, Joseph Parker, Michael Hunter, Sergey Kuzmin, Alexander Pavek, and a whole bundle of guys that were there at one point are no longer there. And then you have Anthony Joshua at the top of the Matchroom heavyweight tree, and you've got Dillian White, Derek Chisora, that sort of on fight-by-fight deals. They're not the future. Those guys are sort of at the tail end. So there really is a bit of a vacuum to try for heavyweights. Fresh heavyweights coming through that are talented, that can go places to really fill that void that is starting to open up. It is a case of renewal by signing someone like Justis Huni. It's a signing for the future. And I think they're going to take their time more so than the earlier phase in Justis Huni's career. And I've made comments, especially on Patreon and other places, videos on the channel, that I think they've been putting him in too tough, too soon between fights, and he's been getting hand injuries and stuff, and they've just sort of exacerbated the issue by putting him in puncher's gloves. But I like the signing. I expect the showcase next. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.